Millionaire forgot his phone on Thanksgiving. Pregnant wife read everything, sold house, and vanished. Do not leave before the ending of this story, because the most dangerous thing Adrian Prescott forgot was not his phone. It was the woman he had spent 6 years teaching to doubt herself. Subscribe for more unforgettable stories of betrayal, resilience, and second chances. Our story begins as Adrian returned from Manhattan, pushed his key into the front door, and discovered that neither the lock nor his wife would obey him anymore. Mr. Prescott, this property was sold yesterday. Adrian Cole Prescott stared at the real estate manager as a moving truck rolled down the snow-dusted driveway, carrying the last pieces of a life Adrian still believed belonged to him. The bronze key slid into the lock. It did not turn. For 1 second, nobody moved. Then Adrian tried again, harder. Metal scraped. The deadbolt held. "Open the door," he said. The manager lowered his tablet. "I can't do that, sir. You no longer have legal access." The words landed softly. The silence after them did not. Through the glass, Adrian saw emptiness. The dining table was gone. The wedding portrait had vanished. In the nursery, winter light exposed the clean rectangle where Clara's crib had stood. No Lillian. No luggage. No baby blanket embroidered with Clara Rose. Only absence. 3 days earlier, that house had smelled of cinnamon, butter, and roasted sage. His pregnant wife had been preparing Thanksgiving dinner while he boarded a flight to Manhattan with another woman. Now even the echo belonged to someone else. Stay with me, because Lillian Prescott did not disappear after discovering an affair. She disappeared after finding a plan with her signature, her medical records, and her unborn daughter's name. Adrian turned toward the porch. A clear glass box rested beside the door. Inside were his phone, old key, certified property transfer, and the Thanksgiving place card Lillian had set beside his untouched plate. On the back, written in her careful handwriting, were 8 words. "You forgot your phone." I remembered who owned the house. Adrian's jaw tightened. "This sale is fraudulent." The manager said nothing. Adrian tore open the property document. The buyer was Clara Haven Foundation. The sale price was fair market value. Clara Haven had completed an earlier appraisal, proof of funds review, and preliminary title work, allowing the closing to be recorded the previous afternoon after independent counsel reviewed every page. At the bottom was Lillian Grace Prescott's signature. Real. Witnessed. Irrevocable. His own phone began vibrating inside the box. Adrian lifted it and saw 12 missed calls from the bank, 7 from the board chairman, and 1 new message from Sloan Mercer. Tell me she never opened the Monday folder. Something cold moved beneath his ribs. He called the bank first. The loan officer did not offer condolences. "The $21 million credit facility has been suspended," she said. "The collateral authorization is under fraud review, and the board has requested an emergency audit." "That house was mine." "No, Mr. Prescott. According to the deed, it never was." The call ended. Snow began falling harder, collecting on his shoulders. Adrian searched the empty rooms for broken furniture, shattered photographs, or anything reckless he could use against her. She had left absolutely nothing behind. That frightened him more. Then he noticed one unheard voicemail. Lillian, recorded 26 minutes after the sale closed. Adrian pressed play. Her voice was quiet, calm, almost gentle. "By the time you hear this, Adrian, the bank will already know which signature was forged." The message ended. Behind him, the moving truck disappeared beyond the iron gates. Ahead of him, the house stood empty. And for the first time in his life, Adrian Prescott understood what it felt like to be locked outside something he had mistaken for his own. Thanksgiving morning began with the smell of butter, cinnamon, and something Lillian Grace Prescott still wanted to believe was hope. Golden light spilled across the kitchen floor as she moved carefully between the oven and the long marble island, one hand supporting the small of her back, the other resting whenever Clara shifted beneath her ribs. At 32 weeks pregnant, every movement required thought. Every breath felt borrowed. Still, Lillian had prepared everything Adrian loved. Turkey glazed with rosemary butter, sweet potatoes with brown sugar, cranberry sauce made from his mother's recipe, a pumpkin pie cooling beside the window. 3 places waited at the dining table, one for Adrian, one for Lillian, and one small porcelain plate between them, placed there as a joke for the daughter who would not arrive until January. "Our first Thanksgiving as 3, Lillian whispered. Clara kicked once. The sound of polished shoes crossed the hallway behind her. Lillian turned. Adrian stood at the kitchen entrance wearing a charcoal suit, silver cuff links, and the expression he used when bad news was supposed to sound temporary. Not the cream sweater she had laid across the bed. Not the relaxed clothes of a husband staying home. A man leaving. "I have to go to Manhattan," he said. Lillian glanced toward the leather suitcase beside him. "That looks like more than a meeting." His smile came quickly. Too quickly. "One of the investors is threatening to pull out of the Harbor Point project. I need to calm him down before the markets open tomorrow. It's Thanksgiving. I'm aware." The softness disappeared from his voice. Then he crossed the room and touched her cheek as if correcting the moment. "I'll be back before dinner." Lillian looked at the suitcase again. Adrian followed her eyes. "That anxiety is getting worse," he said quietly. "You promised Dr. Keller you would stop inventing reasons to panic." The word struck exactly where he intended. For months, every question had become anxiety. Every doubt became pregnancy hormones. Every silence became proof that he was right. Lillian lowered her eyes. "I'm not panicking." "Good." Adrian placed his palm against her stomach. Clara stopped moving. "Everything I do is for you and our daughter." He kissed Lillian's forehead, picked up the suitcase, and walked away. The front door closed. Seconds later, the black car disappeared beyond the iron gates. Lillian stood alone in the warm kitchen, listening to the faint hiss of the oven. Then she saw it. Adrian's phone lay beside his coffee cup. She picked it up, intending to call the driver. The screen lit before she could move. A message appeared from Sloan Mercer. "She still thinks you are coming home for dinner." Lillian's fingers tightened. A second message arrived. "Did you get her signature on the wellness authorization?" The antique clock struck 9. Each chime moved through the house like a warning. Lillian stared at the locked screen, feeling Clara stir beneath her hand. She knew the password. Adrian had never changed it. 8 numbers. Their wedding date. For one final moment, Lillian stood between the woman she had been and the truth waiting behind the glass. Then she entered the code. Lillian opened the phone expecting to find another woman. She found the beginning of her own disappearance. The first messages were painful in the ordinary way betrayal is painful. Hotel confirmations under false names. Photographs of Adrian and Sloan Mercer drinking champagne in rooms Lillian had believed were business conferences. Receipts for jewelry charged to the family account. A reservation for Christmas in Aspen. Then came the cruelty. Sloan had sent a photograph of Lillian leaving a prenatal appointment, one hand beneath her stomach, her face pale from exhaustion. "She looks enormous." Adrian's reply appeared beneath it. Pregnancy was the only thing she was ever good at. Lillian's breath caught. For several seconds, the kitchen blurred around her. The warm lights, polished counters, and untouched Thanksgiving table seemed to move farther away, as if she were watching someone else's life through glass. Clara kicked. Lillian placed a hand over the movement. "I'm here," she whispered. She could have stopped reading. A part of her wanted to throw the phone into the sink, run upstairs, and pretend she had never entered the password. Instead, she kept scrolling. That was when she saw the folder. Monday Transition. The name sounded clean. Corporate. Harmless. Inside were documents with her name on every page. A power of attorney she had never signed. A psychiatric evaluation claiming she suffered from pregnancy-related paranoia. A request granting Adrian temporary control over her medical decisions after delivery. A draft petition describing Lillian as emotionally unstable and potentially dangerous to her unborn child. There were plans to restrict her access to Clara. Plans to place her in a private recovery facility. Plans for Sloan to move into the house before Christmas. Lillian pressed her knuckles against her mouth. The affair had broken her heart. This was designed to take everything else. She opened the financial documents. The lakeside house, her mother's house, inherited before the marriage, had been listed as collateral for a $21 million loan. At the bottom of the authorization was Lillian's signature. It looked almost perfect. Almost. The final stroke curved too sharply. The spacing between her first and last name was wrong. Tiny differences no stranger would notice. But Lillian had spent years examining contracts. She noticed everything. An audio file sat beneath the document. She pressed play. Adrian's voice filled the kitchen. After delivery, she'll be exhausted, medicated, and easy to discredit. Sloan laughed softly. And if she remembers what she owns? She hasn't made a financial decision alone in 6 years. The recording ended. For a moment, There was only the ticking clock and the low hum of the refrigerator. Then Clara moved again. Not gently this time. Lillian straightened. She did not call Adrian. She did not confront Sloan. She opened the camera on her own phone and began recording every screen, every date, every message. Then she emailed copies to an account Adrian did not know existed. At the bottom of the folder, she found one final file. Dozens of photographs of birthday cards, thank you notes, and Christmas letters written in her handwriting. Adrian had not copied her signature once. He had practiced it for months. Lillian called Rebecca Sloan from the landline because Adrian's phone could no longer be trusted. Rebecca answered on the second ring. Lillian. The sound of her own name nearly broke something inside her. I need you to listen, Lillian said. And I need you not to interrupt until I finish. She told her everything. The messages. The forged signature. The psychiatric report. The plan for Clara. The $21 million loan scheduled for Monday morning. Rebecca remained silent until the last word. Then her voice changed. Not louder. Sharper. Do not call Adrian. Do not respond to Sloan. Do not delete, forward, rename, or alter anything on that phone. I already recorded the screen. Good. Now record yourself opening each file from the beginning. Show the date, the sender, the metadata, everything. Save copies in 3 separate places. Lillian looked toward the dark screen. What if he comes back? He thinks you are still waiting for dinner. Use that. The sentence felt cruel. It also felt true. Rebecca instructed her to photograph every financial document, collect her real medical records, and place the original deed to the house somewhere Adrian could not reach. Do you still have the inheritance file from your mother? In the study safe. Get it now. Lillian moved through the hallway slowly, one hand beneath her stomach. The house was quiet except for the whisper of heating vents and the distant ticking of the clock. 6 years earlier, she had walked those same floors carrying spreadsheets instead of a child. Back then, Adrian's company had been one failed development away from collapse. Lillian had found the hidden risk in the Harbor Ridge project. She had rebuilt the lending model, identified the fraudulent contractor invoices, and convinced the bank to delay foreclosure. Adrian later called it his greatest negotiation. Her name never appeared in the interview. At first, Lillian had not minded. Marriage was partnership, she told herself. Success did not need ownership. Then Adrian began changing the story. Her contacts became his network. Her warnings became his instincts. Her career became unnecessary. When she questioned a decision, he called her negative. When she noticed inconsistencies, he called her anxious. By the time she became pregnant, everyone around them believed Adrian handled the complicated things because Lillian was too delicate. He had not erased her all at once. He had done it sentence by sentence. Lillian opened the safe and found the deed beneath her mother's will. Rebecca called back 20 minutes later. The house is yours alone, she said. Inherited before marriage. Protected by the prenuptial agreement. Adrian has no legal right to pledge it. Lillian closed her eyes. And the company? A pause. Prescott Luxury Communities is short nearly $38 million. The loan will not save it. It will only hide the deficit long enough for Adrian to move money elsewhere. If the bank accepts my signature, you may appear complicit. Clara shifted beneath Lillian's palm. How long do I have? Until Monday morning. Outside, snow began touching the windows. Rebecca lowered her voice. There is one more thing. A foundation approached your mother years ago about buying the property. They are still interested. Lillian looked toward the Thanksgiving table waiting in the next room. Can they pay in cash? Yes. For the first time that day, Lillian's breathing steadied. Call them. Rebecca's first instruction after preserving the phone was simple. No dramatic escape without a paper trail. Lillian signed a limited engagement letter with separate real estate counsel, then met with a second lawyer who reviewed the Clara Haven offer without Rebecca in the room. The foundation produced proof of funds, an updated appraisal, a survey, and correspondence showing that it had pursued the property long before Adrian's scheme was discovered. Lillian was told she could walk away at any moment. She did not walk away. She asked harder questions. Who would assume responsibility for taxes? When would possession transfer? How would Adrian retrieve property that belonged to him? Could any board member later claim the foundation received a secret benefit? By the end of the meeting, the attorneys no longer saw only a frightened pregnant wife. They saw the risk analyst Adrian had spent years hiding. Lillian ordered a bonded inventory of every object Adrian owned. His suits, watches, business books, photographs, and personal files were packed under camera and transferred to secure storage. His lawyer would receive the location and retrieval procedure after the deed recorded. The locks would change only after possession legally transferred. Rebecca documented each step because victory built on shortcuts would eventually become another kind of trap. The medical issue required equal care. Lillian's obstetrician reviewed the false report and immediately noted that the supposed evaluation date had not occurred. An independent psychiatrist then interviewed Lillian for nearly 2 hours. He did not certify that she was a perfect person. He documented something more useful. She understood the evidence, alternatives, risks, and consequences of her decisions. She was frightened, exhausted, and angry. None of those conditions made her incapable. At the hospital, a social worker created a confidential safety plan. Lillian could restrict visitors during her own care, but Rebecca warned her that Adrian's parental claims after Clara's birth would be decided through lawful process. "I want protection," Lillian said. "I do not want revenge disguised as protection." Rebecca closed the file. "That is exactly why a judge will listen to you." Everything Lillian still trusted fit into one car. She began upstairs, moving quietly through rooms that had once seemed permanent. In the bedroom, Adrian's suits remained lined inside the closet, arranged by color and season. His watches rested beneath glass. The diamond bracelets he had given her stayed inside their velvet boxes. Lillian took none of them. She packed her identification, medical records, inheritance documents, and the original prenuptial agreement. She folded 6 small outfits for Clara and placed them beside the ultrasound photographs. The final item was a cream-colored blanket embroidered with 2 words. Clara rose. Her hands trembled when she touched the stitching. Then they steadied. Before removing anything, Lillian recorded every room. She filmed the furniture, artwork, silverware, and electronics, speaking the date into the camera. Adrian would accuse her of theft if accusation offered him control. She would leave him nothing to distort. Rebecca worked through the holiday weekend. By Friday afternoon, the bank had received formal notice that Lillian's signature had been forged. By Saturday, 2 independent physicians had reviewed her medical history and confirmed that she was mentally competent, fully informed, and capable of managing her affairs. The false psychiatric report began collapsing before Adrian knew it had been challenged. Rebecca also prepared a protective order, a confidential address request, and a trust that would hold the proceeds from the house for Lillian and Clara. Monday morning arrived beneath a sky the color of steel. Lillian entered a small law office wearing a pale wool coat and no makeup. Her blonde hair was tied low at her neck. She looked tired. She did not look uncertain. Representatives from Clara Haven Foundation sat across from her. Their offer matched the independent appraisal. No hidden discount. No rushed exploitation. The transaction had been reviewed by 3 attorneys. Rebecca placed the final document before her. "This is the last page." Lillian looked at the signature line. For years, Adrian had trained her to believe every important decision required his approval. Even now, a faint echo of his voice remained. "You are too emotional. You do not understand the numbers. Let me handle it." Clara moved beneath her ribs. Lillian picked up the pen. The sound of ink crossing paper was almost silent. Still, it ended more than the marriage. It ended his access. When the closing was complete, the money moved directly into the protected trust. Lillian did not celebrate. She only closed her eyes while Rebecca placed a small fetal monitor against her stomach. Clara's heartbeat filled the room. Fast, strong, alive. That afternoon, Lillian returned to the house one final time. She removed her wedding ring and placed it inside an evidence envelope with copies of the forged documents. On the front step, she left Adrian's phone, the old key, the property transfer, and the Thanksgiving place card. Then she climbed into a rented car registered under her maiden name, Lillian Grace Monroe. Her destination was a small house outside Burlington, Vermont, owned by a college friend Adrian had never met. Snow followed her north. 45 miles outside town, Rebecca called. "Do not turn around," she said. Lillian tightened both hands around the steering wheel. "What happened?" Adrian realized he left his phone. A pause. "He is coming home early." Adrian reached the house before sunset. By then, the closing had been recorded. The locks had been changed under counsel's written advice. Adrian's inventory belongings had been moved to secure storage for supervised retrieval, and every document he planned to use against Lillian had already been copied into hands he could not control. He stood on the porch with snow collecting across his shoulders, staring through the glass at rooms that no longer recognized him. Then he called the police. "My wife is pregnant and mentally unstable," he said. "A lawyer manipulated her into selling our home." The responding officer listened without expression. Rebecca arrived 20 minutes later carrying a leather folder. "The property belonged solely to Mrs. Prescott," she said. "The sale was completed at fair market value. Her capacity was confirmed by 2 independent physicians." Adrian looked at her as if confidence could reverse a deed. "She is emotional. She has been imagining things for months." Rebecca opened the folder. Inside were the forged authorization, the false psychiatric report, and the bank's fraud notice. "No," she said. "You were preparing people to believe that." The officer's posture changed. Adrian noticed. He stopped talking. After they left, he called Sloane. She answered on the 5th ring. "You stored everything on my phone," he snapped. "You used your wedding date as the password. Delete the Monday folder." A long silence followed. "Is the loan gone?" she asked. "Temporarily suspended." "That was not my question." Adrian gripped the phone tighter. "Do what I said." Sloane laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "Can you still afford my lawyer?" The call ended. Then the collapse began. The bank froze the $21 million facility. The board demanded an emergency audit. 2 investors suspended their commitments. The company's insurance carrier refused to cover intentional fraud. By midnight, auditors had identified the shell company. By morning, Sloane had retained separate counsel. Adrian sent Lillian 17 messages. The first demanded that she return. The second warned that she was destroying their family. The third threatened to challenge the sale. The 7th apologized. The 12th said Clara needed her father. The final message contained only 3 words. "Please call me." Lillian answered none of them. She forwarded every message to Rebecca. 1 week later, Adrian entered the boardroom wearing a navy suit and the expression of a man who still believed performance could replace innocence. He told the directors Lillian was jealous, confused, vindictive. He called the forged documents misunderstandings. He called the missing money an accounting delay. He called himself a husband trying to protect a fragile wife. No one interrupted. That silence encouraged him. Then the chairman pressed a button. The screen behind him turned blue. Lillian appeared from a quiet room in Vermont. Her blonde hair was tied low. Her face was pale but composed. One hand rested over Clara. Adrian turned slowly. For the first time, he looked afraid. "Lillian," he said, softening his voice for the room. "Come home. We can fix this privately." She studied him through the screen. "I did not disappear, Adrian." The boardroom became completely still. "I removed myself from your control." Rebecca stepped into view beside her carrying the same leather folder. Then Lillian looked directly at the men who had spent years applauding her husband. "Now," she said, "you are going to hear what he planned to do after my daughter was born." The first recording began with Adrian's voice. Calm, measured, certain no one outside the conspiracy would ever hear it. After delivery, she will be exhausted, medicated, and easy to discredit. No one in the boardroom moved. On the screen, Lillian watched Adrian's reflection in the glass wall behind him. His face remained controlled, but one hand had tightened around the back of a chair. Rebecca placed the first document before the camera. The lakeside property was inherited by Mrs. Prescott before marriage. It was protected by a prenuptial agreement and never belonged to Prescott Luxury Communities. The next page appeared, a power of attorney carrying Lillian's forged signature. Then the digital record showing it had been created on Adrian's office computer. The chairman removed his glasses. Adrian stepped forward. "This is a domestic dispute. My wife discovered an affair and decided to punish me." Lillian did not react. She had spent years reacting exactly as he expected. Not today. Rebecca displayed the psychiatric report. It was written 6 weeks before Mrs. Prescott was supposedly evaluated. A director near the window looked up sharply. The next document was worse. A petition asking the court to restrict Lillian's access to Clara after birth. Then came the proposed transfer of $21 million into a shell company. Then the email describing Lillian as the person who would appear responsible if auditors discovered the fraud. Adrian looked toward the door. 2 security officers were already standing there. "You are destroying your daughter's future," he said, turning back toward the screen. "Everything I built was for her." Lillian's expression did not change. "I did not destroy Clara's future." Her voice was quiet enough to make everyone lean closer. "I stopped you from using it as collateral." The boardroom doors opened. Sloan Mercer entered beside her attorney. Adrian went pale. For one brief second, Sloan looked at him the way Lillian once had, like a woman finally seeing the full shape of the man before her. Her attorney placed a flash drive on the table. "My client is cooperating with the audit and the criminal inquiry." The drive contained messages Adrian had deleted from his phone, instructions to copy Lillian's handwriting, orders to alter the medical report, records of the shell company, and one final email proving that after the loan cleared, Adrian planned to transfer the money, blame Sloan, and leave the country alone. Sloan stared at him. "You were going to sacrifice both of us." Adrian said nothing. There was nothing left to say. The chairman called for a vote. Adrian was removed as chief executive. His financial access was revoked. The company was placed under independent management. All records were referred to federal investigators. No one in the boardroom pretended a flash drive was a verdict. Adrian was removed from operational authority. His access was frozen, and outside counsel took custody of the company's servers and accounting records. The directors notified lenders and regulators, then created a committee composed entirely of members who had not participated in Adrian's transactions. The company would survive only if facts replaced loyalty. Lillian watched the process without triumph. She had spent 6 years seeing Adrian receive credit before evidence was complete. She would not demand the same shortcut in reverse. "Let investigators decide what can be charged," she said. "Your responsibility today is to stop further harm." The oldest director at the table lowered his eyes. Years earlier, he had praised Adrian for the financial model Lillian created. "We should have asked who did the work," he said. Lillian answered quietly. "You should ask now." Security approached him. No one shouted. No one applauded. The silence was colder than humiliation. Adrian had spent years controlling every version of the truth. Now his own voice had testified against him. On the screen, Lillian released a breath she had been holding for 6 years. Then pain tightened across her abdomen. Her hand moved beneath the curve of her stomach. Rebecca noticed immediately. "Lillian." Another contraction came, harder than the first. Lillian looked down as warmth spread beneath her chair. The boardroom disappeared from her thoughts. The investigation. The company. Adrian. All of it. She looked at Rebecca, fear and wonder crossing her face at once. "Clara is coming." Clara Rose Prescott arrived 23 days early beneath white hospital lights and the steady rhythm of machines. For 6 hours, Lillian fought through contractions while Rebecca stood beside her, answering calls, guarding the door, and refusing every request connected to Adrian. Outside the delivery room, the investigation continued. Inside, none of it mattered. At 3:17 in the morning, Clara cried. The sound was small, sharp, alive. Lillian held her daughter against her chest and stared at the tiny face she had nearly lost before ever seeing. Clara's fingers closed around one of hers with surprising strength. For the first time in months, Lillian felt no need to look over her shoulder. "You are safe," she whispered. She was speaking to both of them. The hospital kept Clara under observation for several days. She was early, but healthy. Her lungs were strong. Her heartbeat remained steady. Every nurse who entered the room found Lillian awake, watching the rise and fall of her daughter's chest. Adrian requested access twice. The hospital honored Lillian's confidential patient request, while Rebecca sought a temporary emergency order. At the first family court hearing, a judge authorized supervised contact pending a custody evaluation because of the documented threats and forged medical records. Several months later, federal prosecutors brought charges related to wire fraud, bank fraud, conspiracy, and the use of falsified documents. Prescott luxury communities survived, but not as his empire. Independent managers sold failing properties, repaid investors where possible, and removed Adrian's name from the glass headquarters he had once treated like a monument. Sloan entered a cooperation agreement and later received reduced charges after surrendering records and testifying truthfully. She never contacted Lillian. Lillian preferred it that way. 6 months later, Lillian returned to risk analysis. She worked from a modest office near Burlington, choosing projects that left her enough time to walk Clara through the quiet streets each afternoon. She purchased a small white house with blue shutters. It had no marble foyer, no security gate, no ballroom-sized dining room. But every key belonged to her. The money from the lakeside estate remained protected in a trust for Lillian and Clara. She used only what they needed. The old property became Clara Haven. The nursery became temporary housing for pregnant women escaping financial abuse. Adrian's private study became a legal aid office. The library was named after Lillian's mother. 1 year after the forgotten phone, snow fell again on Thanksgiving morning. Lillian roasted a small chicken instead of a turkey. Clara sat in a wooden high chair, striking the tray with a spoon and laughing at the sound. 2 plates rested on the table. 1 for Lillian. 1 small plate for Clara. There was no empty chair. After dinner, Lillian opened a locked cabinet and removed the phone that had changed everything. Its battery was gone. Its black screen reflected nothing. She placed it inside the evidence box, closed the lid, and turned the key. Behind her, Clara called out. Lillian crossed the room and lifted her daughter into her arms. Outside, snow covered the road where no black car was expected. Adrian believed forgetting his phone had cost him everything. But his real mistake had been quieter. He had mistaken Lillian's silence for surrender and never noticed the moment she remembered her own name. Lillian did not become fearless after the board meeting. She became practiced. Each legal notice still tightened her stomach. Each unfamiliar car outside the house made her check the curtains. But fear stopped being proof that Adrian was right about her. It became information she could examine. Rebecca helped her establish boundaries for communication, and all messages moved through counsel until the court approved a parenting plan. Lillian kept records without living inside them. By degrees, the evidence box became something stored on a shelf rather than something carried in her mind. Lillian did not become fearless after the board meeting. She became practiced. Each legal notice still tightened her stomach. Each unfamiliar car outside the house made her check the curtains. But fear stopped being proof that Adrian was right about her. It became information she could examine. Rebecca helped her establish boundaries for communication, and all messages moved through counsel until the court approved a parenting plan. Lillian kept records without living inside them. By degrees, the evidence box became something stored on a shelf rather than something carried in her mind. Lillian did not become fearless after the board meeting. She became practiced. Each legal notice still tightened her stomach. Each unfamiliar car outside the house made her check the curtains. But fear stopped being proof that Adrian was right about her. It became information she could examine. Rebecca helped her establish boundaries for communication, and all messages moved through counsel until the court approved a parenting plan. Lillian kept records without living inside them. By degrees, the evidence box became something stored on a shelf rather than something carried in her mind. Lillian did not become fearless after the board meeting. She became practiced. Each legal notice still tightened her stomach. Each unfamiliar car outside the house made her check the curtains. But fear stopped being proof that Adrian was right about her. It became information she could examine. Rebecca helped her establish boundaries for communication, and all messages moved through counsel until the court approved a parenting plan. Lillian kept records without living inside them. By degrees, the evidence box became something stored on a shelf rather than something carried in her mind. Lillian did not become fearless after the board meeting. She became practiced. Each legal notice still tightened her stomach. Each unfamiliar car outside the house made her check the curtains. But fear stopped being proof that Adrian was right about her. It became information she could examine. Rebecca helped her establish boundaries for communication, and all messages moved through counsel until the court approved a parenting plan. Lillian kept records without living inside them. By degrees, the evidence box became something stored on a shelf rather than something carried in her mind. On the second Thanksgiving after Adrian lost control of the company, Lillian spoke at the opening of Clara Haven's legal aid wing. She did not mention his name. She spoke about financial abuse that arrived disguised as concern, documents that looked official until someone checked the dates, and women who had been told fear made them unreliable. Afterward, she returned to the White House with blue shutters. Clara, now steady on her feet, carried a wooden key from room to room and tried it against every door. Lillian laughed each time it failed. Before bedtime, she placed the child's toy key beside the sealed evidence box containing Adrian's phone. One key represented a life someone had tried to control. The other represented a future no one would own. Lillian switched off the lamp, lifted Clara into her arms, and closed the door without locking it.